One and everyone who has joined us today. This is a little experiment. We're going to try doing a pop-up chart chat where I'm going to get some feedback from Amanda. There's some stuff I'm working on. It's not fully fleshed out, half-baked, which is uh, indicative of a lot of my work. And I just wanted to bounce some ideas off Amanda about this, and hopefully it will make for a better article and that people will find useful. So, Amanda, thank you for joining me on such short notice, and we'll see how this experiment goes.
Sounds like a plan. Excited to be here. And for folks who are maybe joining us and haven't seen Chart Chat before, oftentimes our episodes are a full hour of deep dive content. And so we're hoping that these kind of short chats give you a bit more behind the scenes about what happens in the minds and brains and writings and musings of the four of us as data visualization creators. Excited to be here, Steve. Curious what questions you have for me, since you gave me
there's something in
briefing.
particular that's been really bugging me. And it has to do with some dashboard, some work I'm seeing out in the wild that is just stunning, beautifully rendered, huge amount of effort to go into this thing as well, but is almost certainly going to fail. So let me step back for a minute. A number of years ago, I saw Nick de Barra. People are going, "Who's Nick de Barra?" If you've never heard the name pronounced, it's de Barrett's. Nick de Barra, and he was presenting at a Tableau conference, and he started, I think, his presentation with most dashboards fail. Now, I happen to agree with that. Do we know that most dashboards fail? Can we say with confidence it's 54.9% of them fail? No, but I've seen a lot of dashboards fail. And I want to get into one reason, and that is I think there's way too much ooh-ah and not enough aha. And the and I'm not exactly sure how to present this, make my case. I don't want to embarrass any colleagues' work on this type of thing, but I want to educate the practitioners and especially our our clients, our stakeholders who are going to be using these things as well. What should you be looking for? Who doesn't want something that's beautiful? I get that, but and to me, if it's a dashboard designed to help you understand your business, it's got to answer at least one of these questions. And I'm putting these questions together. The first one is someone will show me a dashboard. I have no idea what it's about. And you and I are professional chart looker-atters, okay? We can usually look at something and figure out, oh, this is what they're trying to tell me. And if I'm totally flummoxed, the first question I'll ask them is, well, should I be celebrating or panicking looking at this thing? And so essentially that's asking, are we ahead or behind our goals? And then I'll want to know, well, how much are we ahead or behind? And then, well, did this just happen or has it been going on for a while? And is it happening throughout the organization or in only some areas of the organization? Um, wait a second, did this happen last year? Did this happen last quarter? Or is this how are we doing compared to last quarter and to last year? So my take is if you're not answering at least one of those questions, I don't care how beautiful your dashboard is and with curvy round corners on all the dashboard elements, I don't think people will use it after a certain amount of time. And also, I do want to get into a little pet peeve I have about multiple pie charts or multiple donut charts on a dashboard, but I'll put that aside for a second. So, your thoughts, what do you think of this? Would this be useful for people to, kind of have this list of questions and that if it doesn't answer at least one of these things, it's probably not fitting the bill?
I think your point about writing something that's relevant to clients is a really interesting one, because I don't know, maybe I bring this up more often than most people do, but I've had the challenge multiple times where clients see the shiny, pretty things on Tableau Public and they say, why can't I have that on my Tableau dashboard? And the answer is you won't like what it does to your rendering time performance wise to do some of the more complex kind of innovative chart types that aren't as functional? Or do you really want to invest the time and the dollars and the consulting costs to go ahead and do all the aesthetics around making the rounded corners and doing other things that aren't part of the design defaults in a tool like Tableau? And there's a benefit to doing some tinkering. Like, I think there's this kind of trade-off of how much time do we spend making sure something communicates clearly and is aesthetically enjoyable to look at versus being beautiful, to your point on the ooh ah versus the aha. And so when I think about kind of the relevance, I think the actually most important audience you named was around dashboard users. And maybe we don't write enough for our dashboard users or kind of communicate to them about what they can expect and enable those kind of conversations between developers and end users of the data. Because all your points are spot on. I mean, I think having benchmarks and clear kind of targets and what that looks like is important. I think the challenge some dashboard developers would probably come back to you with is, what happens if I don't have those? And people are looking for just like a trend over time and what is happening directionally. And so actually having the data to load into a dashboard to make those kind of comparisons can be a whole nother tranche of data exploration if you're a dashboard developer in some contexts.
Well, it's interesting. I keep going back to the definition that Jeff, Andy, and I went nuts over, which was in the big book of dashboards, which is how do we define a dashboard? And I like its rather broad definition: a visual display of data used to monitor conditions and or facilitate understanding. Now, what happens if you don't have a goal yet? Well, we haven't been in business. We don't know if we should be, should we have 30 subscribers or 3,000 subscribers? We just want to see the trends over time. Are we doing better? Are we doing worse? And as we get a little more mature, we'll have an idea of, though I would say, well, do you have some ballpark of the goals? We could go back and forth. By the way, just having that discussion with a stakeholder is enormously useful. And go, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. What do we want to have certain rough benchmarks? We kind of like to be in this range. You have to have some idea of what you're shooting for to know if you're failing or succeeding. So I'd give some pushback on that. But yet maybe it's just there to, hey, we want you to explore this and maybe discover something that's noteworthy, that's worthy of further exploration. Okay, then you're probably not going to have little red dots indicating this is bad, this is good. And I'd love to have stakeholders who want to do that exploring. Most of them don't. It's usually, hey, here's this thing for you to find important stuff, and then let me know what you found that you think is noteworthy. But the monitoring of conditions, without these things, I just question if people will find the tool valuable. It may be beautiful. It's like, oh my God, it's a Bugatti Veyron, I think, which is, like a $4 million car, and it's absolutely stunning. But imagine it had no engine in it. It didn't actually go anyplace. And it's like, you're not going to use it.
So I think of two things. So one's a more technical question or kind of a process question when you think about the other side of your audience around the data viz developers. And the other one is just around how these kind of tools get used. And one of my big pet peeves is I think that the bands, the big ass numbers at the top, are the ones that are actually meaningless for the most part without context, right? Directionally, are they going year over year higher, month over month, week over week, whatever your unit is, even if you don't have a progress to goal, how are those operating? And if you have seasonality in your work, whatever your work is, your sales, your commodities distribution, whatever it looks like, how are you accounting for seasonality in terms of how you're setting that progress to goal if it's an annual target? So that's one of my pet peeves. When you talk about pet peeves,
No, it's
bands without any context at the top.
And Hans Rosling makes a big deal about that and articulates it very well. A number without context, there are this many people have died, or the malaria rate is such and such, and without any context is, well, is that better than last year, worse than last year? And I agree with you. There are sometimes when look, there's at least one dashboard in the big book of dashboards that just has bands without context, and they're sort of discussion starter. So there are times that I sometimes feel I may be a little bit hypocritical. By the way, anytime that I feel like I'm this, crotchety old guy, going, well, hey, I don't think this, I'd like to be considered neither crotchety nor old, but I don't know if I can quite get there. And I'm poo-pooing these beautiful things. And I'm wondering, well, is it that because I'm that's not something that I can make as easily? So
Mhm.
anytime I'll see something, I'll see a radial chart of some sunburst diagram or whatever. Um, am I questioning it because, well, this is not come easily in my rendering, or is it because it's not, in fact, um, as useful as it could be for the intended audience? If it's just there to, gee, I want to attract attention and get someone to explore, it's fine. But so that's an issue. I'm wondering, and also, yeah, I'm always advocating, well, here's why you should use a bar chart, and then I'll cite an example. Well, why is it okay not to use a bar chart in this case? And I think I can back up that thing. What do you think about that?
So, I mean, I don't think you're crotchety or old, Steve. The,
Thank you.
I think that
That's
I
why I
think
like you as a collaborator.
but so I do think that I probably err more on the side of thinking about aesthetics, but I like thinking about the aesthetics pieces in the context of design systems. Like you look at the work that like Moritz Steffener and his team did with WHO, or Georgia Lupi did recently with Deloitte Insights, and they're building design systems around data visualization that I think are really useful, that allow you to have something that is aesthetically more engaging and pleasing, in part because of its consistency, that actually is really beneficial. And I think that there's something engaging and wonderful about those kind of more elegant visualizations and dashboards. I mean, I don't think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you're advocating for dashboards that are overly cluttered and full of junky bits and have a bunch of grid lines and things, right? Like
No, no,
you're
no.
still like if you look through
I
the big
want
book of
something which who I aspire to have something which is just goes, ah, I want to. I'm spending a lot of time with this thing. I want to spend it in something which just feels good and looks good.
yeah.
Of course.
I mean, I think that the elegance and the design components can be married with that kind of does it answer questions. I agree with you that I don't think it makes sense to have dashboards, and I've worked with clients like that. I have a client right now where it's a question of there are lots of charts that are stylistically correct and aligned to the style guide, but they don't get used because they don't answer a question. And I also think that there's an interest, the two big questions I would ask to you back from a dashboard practitioner perspective, because I would ask these if I was reading an article like this, is one is the practical nature of thinking about the adding in context. So I've seen it done different ways, where you either have a reference table that you blend in with your data sources that gets updated with your targets, or people hard coding in parameters and things like that, which can make for a bit of a mess when you hit the year transition to the next year. And then the second, I think, challenge from a data viz practitioner perspective is there's been a lot of shifts around how people engage with dashboards, right? Like you hear some people say dashboards are dead. I was on DM radio the other day. They're like, is the dashboard dead? I was like, I don't think the dashboard's dead. Like we still have car dashboards too, even though I have a heads up display in front of me on my Mazda CX-9. But if you look at the kind of ways that dashboards take different shapes, I think we have moved a bit away from some of the more structured, like has to be a single pane view dashboard of all on one screen versus adding more vertical scrolling on a business dashboard where you can browse down to look below the fold for additional information, or seeing more people who are doing dashboards that have a lot of pages that you're moving through sheet by sheet through some kind of navigation component to see individual charts but see them larger versus seeing a lot of charts on one single view. And I think those are the two things that I would observe in terms of practitioner challenges on like what is the kind of best practice these days, or how do I figure out what I should do in the context of my design work, because I don't think there's one right answer, right? It's all this it depends space, which is expanded out beyond chart types,
Well,
but
I will say,
the structures of our data experiences.
if you're not working with your stakeholder on those things, ultimately, I think that's why you're really going to fail. Nick
Mhm.
DeBarra's presentation was the 13 types of displays that are unfortunately all called a dashboard. And he has a hierarchy and a taxonomy of these things that I find is a little more structured than necessary. But where I completely agree with him is managing your audience's expectations. And if they're expecting one thing and you're giving something, oh, I thought you wanted interactivity and exploratory and drill down on this and that versus this, top line fits on one screen summary, I've totally failed. Two things for you. One is I'm as I'm writing this thing, a part of me wants to show, well, here's the thing that I have a problem with, but I don't want to. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, something like this. So I'm hoping to fashion something with some of these dashboards that I have a question with, and showing, hey, here's this beautiful thing, and here is a re-rendering of it that is just as beautiful, but is really useful. The other, I wouldn't call it a pet peeve, but I have a big problem when I see multiple pie charts or donut charts on a dashboard, and where you're supposed to make a comparison among these 2 or 3 different pie charts or donut charts. I think the pie and the donut chart have gotten a really bad rap. They're very good for one thing, part to whole, for usually just one segment, maybe 2, anything that starts at midnight. But it's amazing. Oh, how big is that slice? Oh, it's just under 1/4. Oh, it's a little more than a third. Hey, it's just under 1/2. That's an instant read. It's when you have, 8 or 9 slices, these things, and you're supposed to make sense out of some of those smaller slices, the thing becomes totally useless. And but oh my gosh, I've got this pie chart and this one, and I'm trying to compare how big this slice is with this slice over here, and it drives me nuts. It's really hard to do. So
It feels like a layout question too, right? Like how are things kind of laid out and put together? And I agree that there's certainly the side by side tiles of pie charts. I mean, I know Andy likes to bring them up as a joke, I think, in our redesign components. If
he
anyone
likes to
goes back and look at the old
poke me a
redesigns,
bit,
just
but
to poke at Steve. Yeah. I think the pie chart question, I think, is a curious one, because to me that speaks to the question of how you're engaging with your stakeholders. If your business stakeholders really like consuming information and finding that information on a pie chart, then figure out if you have a good data or a good kind of grounded in science reason why it won't work for that specific use case, too many segments or whatever else.
well,
Because and I think that getting feedback is important. I mean, I think back to when I started doing data viz work, I mean, I didn't have a title involving data visualization for years. I was a monitoring and evaluation person. I was on teams that were funded as data demand and use work streams, where data visualization was this one tool that we used to help enable people to use data more. So I think my context on this is just a little bit shifted, because I did work more in business intelligence later, after I'd been doing data viz work as a data person inside of public health for 8 years before I ever was on a formal business intelligence team.
hey, the I will ultimately, I'm trying to work with the stakeholders, and I see them as valuable collaborators. They're opening my eyes as well. And if they're able to get what they want from this thing, if they're able to make the decisions, if they're able to glean the understanding that they want better and faster than using one of many possibilities, maybe one that I wouldn't recommend, they're using this thing. They're the ones in the trenches with it. I'm not going to say don't do that. I will make the case, hey, I think you will be able to do this thing you're trying to do faster this way. Ultimately, what are the questions we're trying to answer? And isn't speed to insight combined with deep understanding what we're shooting for here? So that's
I
the
think that
discussion I've had with them.
I think this point from Ben gets at some of that, right? Is like some of the features we have to create these more interactive data experiences can actually be really valuable, because they can actually help to make that exploration pathway more guided, which I think is interesting in terms of navigation. Now, I think that the navigation that has no visual cues, you happen to click on a bar and it goes somewhere, is really disorienting. It's like
Oh my
Prezi
God.
early on, where it like spins and you're like, where did I just go? But I do think that like thinking meaningfully around how you use navigation for that like Ben Schneiderman big picture first, zoom and filter details on demand approach, and always being able to get back out of it, is really important. And that I think you only in part learn by actually watching your users interact with the dashboard and doing usability testing.
Bingo. I'm going to end on that note. I'm going to share where people can, find Chart Chat in a minute. But couldn't agree with you more. One of the most valuable things to do is when you have created something that you want other, and by the way, what you're talking about there was, oh my God, I clicked on a bar and I didn't know something was going to happen, versus guided analytics, which is here's kind of the steps I want you to go through this. As Ben has pointed out, oh, I'm seeing how this leads to this, how leads to this, and it's a logical pathway that you're taking me down. Is and this came from watching people present dashboards in our workshops and saying, "Oh my God, this is just deadly. It's taking them forever to present what their dashboard does." We flipped it and said, "No, instead of you showing what the dashboard does, I'm going to tell you as an audience what I'm seeing and what I understand." And then, gee, this is telling me this, and you want me to see this, right? And you immediately discover the Achilles heels in the
Mhm,
dashboards when
mhm.
you go, I don't know what that thing is up there. That's confusing,
Yeah.
versus them walking you through it. Um, we
Steve,
have
did we
kind
answer
of,
the question of what the one reason is that dashboards fail, or one of the big reasons? What
oh,
was the what is the big reason? What are you gonna pitch to people in your article then based
well,
on this?
in the article, this is one reason, and this is the too much ooh ah, and not enough aha, and that's what this is going to be about, and that it should, if your dashboard doesn't answer at least one of these things, but that is not the only reason why these things fail, and I think ultimately it's a disconnect between the person who's making the stuff and the people who are going to be using the stuff. Um, we'll see how this experiment went. Amanda, I could speak with you for another 2 hours
I
without it
know.
becoming.
Me too.
Um, but let me just share. Let me see if I can share my screen quickly so that people can see.
I'm looking forward to reading the article because I enjoy having pieces of short content like that to go ahead and refer folks to. Oh, yes,
So
the new website. Oh, it's so beautiful. Jeff did such a
it's
great job.
chartchat.live, and where you can register for the next episode, where you can follow us on LinkedIn, sign up for our newsletter, and of course follow the doings of the Data Visualization Society. So hey, hope to do maybe several of these a month, these little
Yeah.
short pop-up chart chats. Thank you so much for joining us. And well, my camera has died on us, but I think that's okay.
That's a
Um,
wrap, right?
yeah,
Well, it's
that
great
is a
to
wrap. And Amanda, if you can do our trailer theme
play us
song,
out, right?
and we'll take it from here. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. We'll see everyone at the next chart chat.